Good evening, dear participants, and welcome to the Mongolian Evaluation Association's Learning Session number 2, 2024. And first, let me introduce myself. My name is Delgir Murung, a member of Mongolian Evaluation Association. And I'm an individual consultant of monitoring and evaluation. And I have 14 years of working experience in the development sector. And today I will be responsible for moderate this webinar. So as now, I'm glad to welcome Dr. Ricardo Ramirez, Mr. Joaquin Navas, and Dr. Sonal Zaveri, who is who will present this the title of Utilization-focused Evaluation, UFE, a decision-making framework. And as now I will briefly introduce our speaker's biography. So also the participants, if you have any urgent questions, you can ask while the presentation is ongoing. Dr. Ricardo Ramirez. The Ricardo Ramirez has been registered as an independent researcher and consultant in Guelph, Ontario, Canada since 1997. He holds a Ph.D. in interdisciplinary rural studies and is a crediting lead evaluator with the Canadian Evaluation Society. His currently work includes the design and implementation of utilization-focused and developmental evaluation approaches, capacity development in evaluation and the communication, multi-sectoral, multi-stakeholder and collaborative approaches for national resource management, and the participatory planning in the complex adaptive contexts. Since 29, he has co-founded, directed DECI, a capacity building project that trains researchers in evaluation and communication globally. He's an adjunct professor in capacity development and extension at the School of Environmental Design and Rural Development, University of the Guelph. Prior to that, he worked with a think tank in the Netherlands, with the Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN in Rome, and with the NGOs in Latin America and the Caribbean involved in the sustainable agriculture, rural development, and capacity building projects. Next speaker is Mr. Joaquin Navas. Joaquin is a freelance evaluation consultant with more than 20 years of the relevant experience in applied research in the both of life and social sciences. He holds a bachelor science degree in animal science and a master science degree in capacity development and the extension of University Guelph, Canada. From 2000 to 2008, he worked in R&D with the private sector developing nutrition software to help Canadian dairy farmers become more profitable. He also has more than 15 years professional experience working with the large and small agricultural producers in Colombia, Paraguay, and Guatemala. From 2009 onwards, Joaquin has worked as an independent evaluator of the research projects seeking to influence policy for reducing social inequalities. Mainly in Latin America, he is a part of DECI-AM and specializes in a utilization-focused evaluation and the developmental evaluation, which he has mainly applied to support organizational learning and evidence-based decision-making. So our next speaker is Zonal Zaveri, Dr. Zonal Zaveri. Zonal Zaveri is India-based with over 30 years experience in strategic planning, program designing, capacity building, mentoring, and evaluation. She has worked in more than 30 countries in Asia, East Asia, West Asia, Africa, Asia Pacific, Central Asia, Middle East, and Eastern Europe at the grassroots, subnational, national, regional, and international levels, bringing a broad contextual experiences. Sonal's interests relate to how rights, inclusion, local wisdom, and the gender are addressed across complex human and natural ecosystems. For over a decade, she mentored organizations in a UFE, part of the DECI project for a co-designed outcome mapping using gender and equity principles, and is experienced in the use of feminist and participatory approaches in evaluation. She is the co-designer and the co-facilitator of first online gender and evaluation courses in South Asia, and that successfully completed multiple iterations. She holds regional and global leadership positions, founder and former board director community of Evaluators South Asia, founder and coordinator of GENSE and the Gender and Equity Network South Asia, co-chair Eval Gender Plus, board member of IDEAS and the EAC, and core member of C2SE South to South Evaluation with the address Asymmetries Global Evaluation. Thank you for all speakers. And if you would like more information about their presentation and biography, and we will send it to you by the email after this webinar. And now I would like to switch to our special guest, Dr. Ricardo.
Thank you very much, and good evening to Mongolia and to other colleagues in other parts of the world. It's an honor to meet with the Mongolia Evaluation Association and share some of our insights. I'm going to see if I can share the screen. Is it visible?
Yes.
Okay, so here we go. I wanted to first explain that this presentation is really the result of two projects that coexist. The DECI project, called Designing Evaluation and Communication for Adaptive Management, is a project funded by IDRC, the International Development and Research Center in Canada. And there's several members of the team on this call: Dal Broadhead, Julius Nyangaga, Joaquin, Sonal, and I. We've been working in training projects in utilization-focused evaluation and research communication since 2009. But the invitation to talk to Mongolia Evaluation Association came through a project in Mongolia that is part of the LIFT program, the DESIRA program rather. DESIRA is a program funded by the European Union that covers 70 projects worldwide. And there's a project in Mongolia called STREAM that we have been supporting. And so the DESIRA program includes a facility called LIFT. And there's 2 or 3 of us on this call that work with LIFT, Joaquin, myself, and I think my colleague Marlene is also on this call. And Julius from DECI has also been contributing to LIFT. So the DECI program and the DESIRA-LIFT program have done quite a bit of interchanging of expertise and staff. I wanted to just say a few things about this presentation. We have one presentation, and Sonal, Joaquin, and I will be presenting different slides. We will send you the presentation after this call so that you can have it as reference. So, you know, participants don't need to take screenshots or take notes. They can focus on the presentation. The websites for both these projects are shown in the last slide. So again, if you want future reference to the 2 projects, there's a lot of resource materials. And one of the last slides also includes a list of reference materials and hyperlinks. So that's all coming your way. I probably won't be able to see the chat. So Delger, if there's questions that arise in the chat, feel free to interrupt us and we will respond to questions that come up. So I'll move on this next slide, and this is over to you, Sonal.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ricardo. I hope all of you can hear me well. It's my pleasure to be on this call and to be speaking to the members of the Mongolian Evaluation Association and other evaluators and practitioners from around the world. As Ricardo had mentioned, we have a website that is DECI-AM, and it's known as Evaluation Communication in Practice. And as he mentioned, we've been working on both of these since 2009. And our current focus right now is on how we are able to adaptively manage both evaluation and communication. And this includes a team of mentors from around the world. I would definitely encourage you to have a look at this website because it has lots of materials. It has videos, it has an e-guide, there's lots of knowledge based on our experience and practice. So it's extremely practical, and I'm sure you'll find it of great interest to you. We also have our approach is to mentor. And so you'll find a number of mentoring tools as well and case studies in our part of our work. As mentioned before, we are working both on evaluation as well as on communication. So here I will talk about the 12 steps of the utilization-focused evaluation approach. There are some more in a later iteration of it, but we find these 12 extremely practical. And as you will see, they are color-coded, and instead of being presented in a linear fashion, it clusters around certain similarities. And you will also see that these arrows link many of the steps together. And I think that's the power of this approach, that it goes back and forth, it reiterates, it reviews, it learns as we move forward. So you will find this approach is extremely different from any other very straightforward evaluation approach, which has a terms of reference, it has a set of questions, and you go and collect data, analyze it, and give the report. So a lot of the arrows you see relate to engagement. So the first step is assessing program readiness, and the second, the evaluator's readiness. Now, readiness is absolutely critical because the UFE approach, as mentioned, is different from other approaches, and it requires considerable commitment and engagement of time and interest in this process. The ultimate aim is to ensure that the evaluations are used and it doesn't just leave it to dissemination. And so the readiness is critical for this approach. after these two steps, which talk to each other, we talk about identifying primary intended users and the users. Now, the primary intended users are the ones that whom we identify that have a skin or a stake in this particular evaluation. They are those who are deeply involved. They are in some decision-making role, and they have some clear uses in their minds about the findings that they would like to, use and how they want to make some decisions around it. So a lot of the work that we do initially is actually finding these primary intended users. Now, the users are not a general term such as we'd say policymakers, decision makers, or program managers. We actually identify them by name because we're talking about accountability and accountability of these users to use the findings from this particular approach. So as you see, we talk quite a lot about these 4 steps, and then we move into the situational analysis and then look at what is the situation in terms of a particular area that you would want to study and learn much more about it. Once we do that, we then come to step 6, which is focusing the evaluation. This is basically developing your key evaluation questions. Now, that's really dependent upon what the user wants to learn, how they want to use those findings from those key questions. So you will see a bit of back and forth in order to understand that. You will also understand that the development of these key evaluation questions is not by the commissioner. It's not by the donor, but it's by the user of the evaluation. And that's a powerful power shift and also enables contextualization, localization, and so on. So once we have decided on the key evaluation questions, usually there are 2 to 4, we then move on to the evaluation design. Now, the evaluation design is somewhat similar that you would do in other evaluation projects because the design is related to the sort of questions that you ask. But step number 8, which is simulation of use, is very, very different. So once you've decided your design, your tools, your questionnaires, interview schedules, and your analysis that you want to do, you actually try it out. Try it out meaning that you kind of simulate or pretend or develop dummy tables and findings to see whether it makes sense. Do these questions make sense? Does this design make sense? Do we need to add more questions, delete some of the sub-questions? Do we need to change the way we are going to do? And believe me, this step is so important. We did this for all our projects, and I have to say that when I was in Mongolia, and we did it with the Dream IT project, which I will talk about shortly, they had, I think, more than 40, 50 questions. And by the time we finished this step, it really honed down to a sensible number. So the simulation is a very unique step of UFE. And then, of course, the step number 9 and 10 is something, again, that most evaluators are familiar with, which is to deal with data collection and data analysis. And then we have the facilitation of use. Now, we'll talk a little bit further of how the users are involved throughout this process later on in the slides. But as you see these large arrows, the use is linked clearly with what the users had decided that they wanted it for. Sometimes unexpected uses also emerge, but the whole idea is that use happens. And usually when we have done this process practically, we found that the use happens automatically. Even while we're analyzing the data, people own it, they start using it. And finally, at step 12, we have the meta evaluation, which is basically learning, telling the story of what happened and reflecting upon the process of evaluation. So I'm sure this is quite a lot to, sort of assimilate and process, but I'm sure we'll have time for more questions. And as we finish the presentation, I'm sure it'll be more clearer. Now, when we started the DECI project, we were really working on the left-hand side that you see, which is the UFE and what I have just described. Who are the users? What is the purpose of the evaluation? What are you going to use it for? What are the key evaluation questions? And what are the tools and methods to collect data, which is all about the design and the data collection. We started off with that. But as I mentioned, we've been working on this since 2009, and we realized that communication is an essential part of the use of evaluations. And so we added this in the hybrid, the DECI hybrid. And then when we analyzed further what are the steps of communication, we realized that they're actually very similar to what we do in UFE. So for example, if you wanted to evaluate communication or plan for it, you would need to find out, just like you do in the UFE, who are the stakeholders, who's the audience that you need to engage with and communicate with? What is the communication purpose? Why are we doing it? For what? What are the methods, media, and channels? And that is for each of the audience group. A policymaker would have a very different media channel to understand the findings compared to, say, an academician. What are the measurable objectives in the sense that what is the evidence? How are we going to find out to what extent we have reached with our communication and what has been the outcome of the communication? So what we realized is that the readiness component, the situational analysis could be a hybrid to understand both the UFE as well as communication. The steps were very similar. Here are a number of tools, books resources that are of great use for practitioners, evaluation practitioners, and they're written in a very simple language. So it's easy to understand, and they're all based on our experiences and our case studies. So you will find that over the years, we have added different components. And as just mentioned, we've added communication and decision-making to our portfolio of resources. And the latest one includes how do we build capacity? How do we get people to understand how to do this process? So these are extremely valuable, and you'll find them all on the website that's listed here in 3 languages.
We don't have them in Mongolian yet, right?
That's why I mentioned it's very simple. So I'm sure you can take a stab at translating it. Okay, so this is this takes me back to Mongolia and to my very, very pleasant stays that I had there. And this is the case study that you would find in the first book that was mentioned in the earlier slide. This was with DREAM-IT, which was development research to empower all Mongolians through information communication technology in Mongolia. So basically, it was a capacity building project for researchers. And I mentored the DREAM-IT. It was an umbrella organization, and there were a number of sub-projects within it. I have to mention that DREAM-IT was actually populated by technocrats in the sense that they were from the IT industry. They had absolutely no clue about what is evaluation, how do you do it, and so on and so forth. But this IDRC-supported project encouraged them that if you want to evaluate what's working and what's not, then here is UFE and here is a mentor. That was me, and we can help you in this process. And it was a fantastic process because we helped them to formulate, the key questions, the users, the uses. And as we went down that journey, we actually found many, many unexpected findings, and we also had unexpected results. And we were able to really enrich this evaluation, which we would never have thought of from the beginning. And again, if you would like to read more about it in detail, it's in the resource, our first resource. That was, I think, 2017, I think. So I encourage you to read that.
Thank you, Sonal. So I'm going to now introduce the DESIRA and DeSIRA-LIFT project. So as I mentioned, DESIRA stands for Development of Smart Innovation Through Research in Agriculture. And it has been funding 70 projects worldwide that are trying to involve multiple stakeholders in improving innovation in agricultural and food. And the DESIRA program includes DESIRA-LIFT, and it's some features of DESIRA-LIFT are similar to DECI in that we provide support to the country-based projects to enhance their capacity in promoting agricultural innovation systems. So many of these projects are bringing in multiple stakeholders to innovate together. And the work that the LIFT evaluation team has been doing is helping those projects make sense and figure out how to do evaluation of these system-wide changes. And so we were invited through for the Mongolian Evaluation Association by a project based in Mongolia that is called Stream Mongolia. And you will get the link to the DeSIRA-LIFT Community of Practice website that you see here, and you'll be able to click on the map for any of these projects. So the Mongolia project then has a whole bunch of summaries of what they've been doing. And as you can see, they've been doing a lot of very innovative communication work as well. So I think I now pass this on to Joaquin to tell us the story of UFE in more detail. Joaquin?
Great. Thank you, Ricardo, and thank you, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you this evening, this morning for some of us. Sonal did a great job at providing an overview of the UFE process and the different UFE steps. So in the following slides, I will be providing steps. So,
Joaquin, we lost your voice.
As explained, that's monitoring evaluation. Pardon me?
Joaquin, we lost your voice, so you may want to turn your camera off. Right now? Oh, I think we lost Joaquin. I will continue covering these slides while he reconnects, because he may have just accidentally disconnected. He's traveling right now, so he's probably doing it from his phone. So until he comes back, I'll cover for him. We wanted to, and as you saw in the introduction, utilization-focused evaluation is not another method. It's actually a decision-making framework. And the emphasis is utility and actual use of evaluations. So as many of you, and I saw that in the survey of participants, all of you are evaluators, and you may have had the frustration that your evaluation reports just sit on the desk collecting dust. So in this approach, the focus is to make sure it's used. It can be very collaborative. So it's an approach where, as Sonal said, the power differentiation between the funder and a grantee is reduced. And it has this potential for the primary intended users to be the owners of the evaluation design. And this is the part that we have found gives projects a lot of sense of ownership, interest, and they become very strict users of good evidence. The fact that they come up with the evaluation questions makes them hungry for good evidence. Let me know if you see Joaquin come back on the list, because I may not be able to see him.
I am back, Ricardo, if you can hear me.
We can hear you well, and we're now on the next slide. If you can see the slides, Joaquin.
Yes, I can.
It's over to you.
Okay. Sorry about the interruption. So, as Ricardo mentioned, UFE is a decision-making framework for MEL, which invites project team members to become primary intended users of the evaluation. So the role of the primary intended users is to work with the evaluator to define the uses or purposes of a MEL system. So by working together, they look at the project and they define what is it that they want to achieve through the evaluation process. So we know that many projects are required to do evaluation for accountability, but in the context of UFE, accountability represents one of many uses or potential uses. So UFE allows people to focus on other purposes and not just accountability, and it's very learning oriented. So yeah, it is very it's so much broader, and in terms of premises for UFE, we're going to provide you with the main premises. One of them is that the evaluation should be judged by their actual use. So as Sonal was mentioning, UFE is about making useful evaluation. So it really emphasizes use all along the process. Another premise is that no evaluation should go forward unless and until there are primary intended users who will commit to using the information and the findings that is produced through the evaluation process. Third premise is that primary intended users of the evaluation are involved in the full process. So they should be engaged from the very early stages of the evaluation, and they should commit to using the findings. And one of the thinking principles behind this is that if you don't identify the users in the early stages of the evaluation, it is likely that the evaluation findings would not be used by anybody. So this is very important. Ideally, evaluation is part or should be part of the evaluation or the program design. So the primary intended users start defining what information they want to gather or to analyze in order to answer key evaluation questions. And we say ideally because it's not always possible to embed the evaluation from the beginning of the project, but in UFE, it's desirable to have it start as early as possible. And in the context of UFE, the evaluator's role is to work with and help intended evaluation users clarify the uses of the evaluation and formulate the key evaluation questions. So implications for use are part of every decision through the process. You're always thinking about how this is going to be useful, how this is going to contribute to the use of the evaluation at the end of the process. So use is the driving force behind UFE. So as Sonal had mentioned, UFE has 12 steps in its original model. It has evolved to include more steps, but we have stayed with the initial 12 steps because we find it is more practical and manageable. So as you see, and as Sonal had mentioned, we came up with this diagram where we used different colors through the process. So the orange part of the diagram refers mostly to the initial phases of the evaluation, where you are assessing readiness and you are understanding the context and defining the purposes of the evaluation. And then you go to another phase, which is the design phase, where you formulate the key evaluation questions and you come up with your evaluation plan, which is the blue section in this diagram. And then you move on to the implementation phase, which are steps 9 and 10, where you actually collect the data, analyze the data, and then as an evaluator, you should facilitate use of that data of the findings so that you can do useful evaluation. So as you can see, we spend a lot of time in the initial phases, which ensures that the evaluation really makes sense to people involved and that will provide useful findings at the end. So we're going to explain the principles of collaborative practice in evaluation, which well, it lays the key the key principles for UFE. So we come back to the notion that it is a process through which an evaluator helps primary intended users to select the most appropriate content, model, methods, theories, and uses for their specific situation. So we can say that UFE is a collaborative approach that seeks to generate learning. It can be very participatory, and it should be quite participatory in the initial phases where you're thinking about the purposes, the uses that you want to give to the findings. And for the design phase can be very, very participatory, but then it can be more collaborative in the implementation stages, meaning that the most of the data and the data collection and analysis is done by the evaluator with support from the users, but the role of collecting data and analyzing data is more on the shoulders of the evaluator. So as we said, evaluation has to be judged by its use in the project. So in the early stages, we talk about readiness, and readiness is about getting management buy-in. This is really important because if the project management is not aligned with the approach, then it becomes very difficult to do UFE. Readiness means that the project is willing to designate the necessary resources and the staff for doing evaluation. It should also look at the management of different interests in a project. So you may have in a project accountability requirements like the OPSIS framework that the European Union uses, and you should be able to manage that on top of other uses that the primary intended users could be interested in. So you have to really think if you're ready for that, if you have the time, if you have the resources and the interest for engaging in something like that. We look at organizational culture, and it is desirable that we have a culture that is open to change and to learning. When this is not there, it's quite difficult to do UFE. We need people with curiosity, and we also need evaluators' readiness. That means that the evaluator has to make sure that he's comfortable with the context in which she or he will be working. Next. So engaging stakeholders is very important in UFE, as we have mentioned, because it helps to enhance the learning process, not just at the personal level, but also at the organizational level. When you work with people who are in the project, you help them build their confidence and the application of evaluation findings to program practices. And it also helps reduce the power differentials between evaluator and program practitioners. In some cases, it can also help level the power differences between donors and project implementers. So this is very important. And we have to understand that in UFE, it is about negotiating decision-making because not all stakeholders have the same interests. So this process helps with the negotiation so that the evaluation findings are useful and make sense to most stakeholders who are engaged in the project. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how to engage or select primary evaluation users. Not all stakeholders are primary evaluation users. You usually come up or you identify the stakeholders of the evaluation, and then you can decide who to invite to the process as evaluation users. Evaluation users become users on a voluntary basis. So as an evaluator, you can only invite them and you explain to them what their role is and what is expected from them, but they can accept or decline the invitation. So ideally, you should come up with a very diverse group of candidates to be users, and you extend the invitation to them. You explain what UFE is about, and you have to make sure that there are people who are interested in the project, who are knowledgeable about the project, who are open-minded and willing to learn, who represent an important interest group within the project, who have credibility, who are teachable, and it is very important that they're available for ongoing interaction throughout the evaluation process. So some people may be interested, but they might be too busy. And so you may have to make sure that people are available and that they're committed to working with you as an evaluator to design the evaluation overall, including the key evaluation questions, and then to use whatever findings come out of the evaluation. So when it comes to step 4, which is the situational analysis, so you already have a sense of the readiness of the project. You have a sense of who the primary users are going to be, and you start looking at the context for the evaluation. So you can examine prior experiences with evaluation. You try to identify possible barriers or resistance to use and find ways of dealing with them. You identify factors that may support and facilitate use. You should get a clear idea about the available resources for the evaluation. It is also important to identify upcoming important decisions or deadlines or timelines that the evaluation should meet. Assess the evaluation knowledge level and experiences of primary intended users. It is very important to understand the political context of the evaluation and calculate how political factors may affect use, and make sure that important constituencies and diverse stakeholder groups are represented among primary intended users. In some cases, you can come to the conclusion that there is no readiness or that it is not enough to continue with UFE. So sometimes as evaluators, we can abort an evaluation process if we see that it does not meet the requirements for UFE. And in that case, we should recommend another approach. So when it comes to uses, they can be very different in nature. It very much depends about the interests of the project, the objectives, etc. But here are some examples of possible uses that you may have in a UFE process. So one potential use could be documenting outcomes or impact, reflecting and learning about process and methodology, making decisions and adapting a strategy, which may lead you to developmental evaluation, and which I will explain later in this presentation, or contributing to generating knowledge, or improving a communication strategy, and accountability could also be a use, as we have mentioned. So these are just examples, but primary intended users, in collaboration with the evaluator, are invited to be as creative as possible. It is recommended not to go with too many uses, maybe 2 or 3 uses, depending on the project nature and the interests of the users, as I mentioned.
Thank you, Joaquin.
Yeah.
Sonal, do you still have to leave at the top of the hour? I'm trying to manage time.
Yes,
Yeah.
I will have.
Okay.
I have another meeting scheduled. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to go through the next few slides a little bit faster. For the participants, remember that this will be part of the presentation that we will be copying. But just to give you a sense of how the nuts and bolts work, as you develop these uses in the key evaluation questions, one of the things we like to do is to emphasize that an evaluation can have multiple uses or purposes in parallel, as Joaquin just mentioned. And so in this case, you can have a summative type of question on accountability plus a monitoring or formative type of views. And then each of them will have corresponding 1 or 2 or 3 associated key evaluation questions. And so as we build the process, you're constantly having this parallel planning of 2 or 3 complementary different evaluation uses or purposes. The last one we will touch on in a few slides, which is developmental evaluation, which is how do you introduce the evaluation of something emergent or exploratory or tracking a pilot in the project. But I wanted to spend a little bit more time on this slide because this is a very practical aspect. On the left column, we've added emphasis on evaluation uses, which is why are you doing the evaluation? What are the broad purposes? What's urgent? What decisions do you need to inform? And then we talk about aiming for 3 to 5 uses to keep it manageable. And then emphasizing that the primary users will have unique uses or purposes. As Joaquin said, it's a negotiation process. The next phase, the next step is asking the primary users to narrow down on specific evaluation questions. And this is a part that is quite painful because they have to make choices of which aspects of the project they want to focus on. And so this is why we spend a lot of time with this step. And that's why the arrows go back and forth, because sometimes as the users come up with a very specific question, they realize that another person has to be brought into the process. And so this is a very detailed analysis that we do as facilitators. And you can see in the table that it's only once you have uses and key evaluation questions that you focus on the evidence needed, qualitative, quantitative, the sources of evidence, and the data collection tools. And so as many of you practitioners, as we have found, very often the terms of reference for conventional evaluation start at the last column saying, do 5 focus groups and 2 interviews. And in UFE, this is like 4 steps down the road. So Sonal, I think the next few slides are yours before you have to run.
Okay, thank you so much. I wanted to talk to you about a very unique step in UFE, which is simulating use. Now, if you probably realize, there were quite a few steps that went before this. And in practice, whenever we came to this step, people would say, oh no, there's still something more do we have to do before we get into the data collection. But believe me, once they realized how this particular step was useful, they were willing to spend time on it. So what is this about? So it's planning before collecting the data, which means that you prepare some dummy or some artificial, or you make up some results based on the questions and the tools that you have. And they could be possibly positive, possibly negative. And you say, okay, if I collected the data and I got these sort of findings, what would I do with it? Would it affect the use? Maybe I need to go back and check my key questions. Maybe I need to tweak my data collection methods. And as I mentioned earlier, when I worked with DreamIT, we had so many questions and we whittled it down to very few because of this particular step. It also enables you to say, okay, I wanted to make a certain decision based on these findings. Am I going to be able to make it? So it really helps you to review and think before you start putting your resources, and resources mean time and money, into collecting the data. Because once you start on that, you go through analysis, getting the findings, and then the use and so on. So this is like a red light, and it really helps to make us stop and pause and think about what we have done so far. Next slide, please. So in the data collection tips, you'll see in the lower half of this, some of the very, very basic evaluation plans that you will find in all evaluations. So the methods, the protocols, storage, budget, and so on and so forth. So I'm not going to dwell on that much. But what are the data collection tips for UFE? So first, you must inform the primary users of your progress, where you're going, what data you're collecting. Just keep them in the loop so that they feel engaged and involved. And if there are certain findings or dilemmas or questions coming, while you're collecting this data, it's really good to inform your user about it. And once they begin to get involved at this stage, you will find that they really understand how the data is coming, what is not coming, and they are less likely to question later on. Next, please. Again, data analysis, something we do in all our evaluations. But here, what is different? The users are involved in the analysis. And I don't mean that they have to go through the analysis tables. But what I mean is that when you do the analysis, you go and share with the users, this is what we are finding, this is what's happening. We think this could be interpreted in this way. Do you have a different way of interpretation? How are you going to use these findings? So it really helps them to start thinking about the whole process and, thinking about what are some of, how could I use this? What do I recommend from this analysis? So again, engaging them, involved in them is really, really useful. As I mentioned, they don't do the analysis, but we keep informing them about it. Next, please. Now, of course, the facilitating use, that's what the whole purpose of UFE is. So again, we remind our primary user, okay, so here are the findings and how do you plan to use it? What I have found in my practice is you do not really have to nudge them. By the time you come to this step, they're already using it because they are so fascinated by the findings. They can link in their whatever position they are in decision making that, oh, I can use it for X and Y and Z. And it really becomes very, very easy doing that even before the report comes out. And that is what I meant about, you don't just disseminate to a few people, but there are lots and lots of other opportunities that unexpectedly come up. It's also important to note that a lot of unexpected results come. In DreamIT, in the evaluation I did in Mongolia, we actually developed a completely new checklist on how to find out whether a project is innovative or not. That was not the original purpose we started off with, but this became a byproduct. So again, when we got it, how are we going to use it? They decided that they're going to use it for the next iteration of sub-projects that they were going to grant. But it's also important to see that there is no misuse. I mean, are they using the data for some manipulative purposes? And so I think it's really important as evaluators to be ethical and to keep a watch on how the findings are being used and for what decisions. Now, this is really the fun part, the meta evaluation, because it's all about the story, right? So what happened? Just following up. So you don't end the project by, oh, we finished the findings, you've done the use. Really go back and think about what happened with the user. Did you actually use it? Did other uses emerge? So we go just a bit beyond the evaluation and we reflect on what happened. What could we have done better? So it's a fantastic learning exercise on how we can do it better. And it brings a lot of insights, not only to us as evaluators and the processes that we have done, but also for the user who says, well, maybe I could have asked a slightly different question, and perhaps that's how I would do it next time. So UFE is truly a learning platform to do better next time.
Thank you so much, Sonal, and I'm sorry you have to leave us, but it's been very special having you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It has been my pleasure. Thank you.
Okay. I think these next 3 slides are yours, Joaquin.
Yes, could you actually give me the next one before this one, please? Thank you. So I'm going to explain very briefly about developmental evaluation, which some of you might have heard of. So developmental evaluation is evaluation of UFE, and it happens when, as an evaluator, we're dealing with a very complex scenario with a lot of uncertainty, and we're trying to maybe develop something new or try something that hasn't been tried before in that context. And so the idea or one of the uses for this type of evaluation, for developmental evaluation, is to provide ongoing feedback so that you can help a group of people develop a model in that new context. And the main variation of for UFE is that instead of facilitating use as a one-time event towards the end of the evaluation, you do it as an ongoing activity in the evaluation process. And so it becomes what we call the feedback loop throughout the process. And that's what we show on the picture of the right, where the evaluator is constantly providing feedback, facilitation, the use of the findings, and assessing whether that feedback that he's providing is useful or not, and then going back to data collection, facilitation of use, etc. So this is ongoing, and it usually ends when the project implementers consider that you have come to the model that you wanted to develop. So as I said, this is a variation, and it differs in the way the findings are used throughout the process, but the design phase is very similar to the rest. So just a very quick introduction to developmental evaluation. And we can go to the previous now, Ricardo. So just to summarize some of the differences between traditional evaluation and developmental or UFE in general. So in conventional evaluation, the evaluator usually is there to render a definitive judgment of success or failure of the project. The measurement of success is against usually predetermined goals. In contrast, in UFE, it's more about providing feedback and generating learning to support changes in direction or strategy during a project. It helps develop measures and monitoring mechanisms as goals emerge and evolve. In conventional evaluation, the position of the evaluator is usually as an outsider to assure independence and objectivity. But in UFE and in developmental evaluation, the evaluator becomes almost a part of the team, and so it's the evaluator is more engaged with the implementers in an ongoing basis, because it is desirable, as we mentioned, to be there from the beginning of the project. So in conventional evaluation, we see that the evaluation is based on linear cause and effect logic models, as in UFE and in developmental evaluation. The evaluation is more about to capture systems dynamics, interdependencies, and emergent interconnections. In conventional evaluation, it aims at producing generalizable findings across time and space. As in UFE, we aim more at producing context-specific understandings to inform ongoing innovations. The main use for conventional evaluation tends to be accountability, focused on external authorities or stakeholders who are interested in the project. In UFE, that's not the main use. It has not, like, it can be used, but there are many other uses. So accountability is not the center of the evaluation. In conventional evaluation, we see that the evaluator determines the design based on his or her own perspective. In contrast, in UFE and in developmental evaluation, the evaluator collaborates with those engaged in the change effort to design the evaluation process. So it's not based on the views of the evaluator, but on the views and on what the primary evaluation users consider important. So UFE is very much focused on learning and not so much in rendering opinion on success or failure of a project. So this is just a quick summary of the main differences, and you may have questions that we will try to answer at the end. I think it's back to you, Ricardo. You're muted.
Thank you. So one of the aspects of both the DECI project and the LIFT project is finding ways to help partner evaluators and project teams learn UFE. And so we've been learning that it happens through experiential learning. So a workshop like today, excuse me, is more awareness raising. We've been finding that just-in-time mentoring is effective, where you support the partners at every step of the process when they're ready to implement that. And so it's very much learning by doing. And the readiness is something that needs constant attention to nurture it, because sometimes you may lose it. And the learning, the aha moments seem to come later, when primary users realize that they're in control of the vehicle as opposed to being in the back seat. As we mentioned before, defining methods and tools comes a bit later than what we're used to. We're going to finish this with just a couple more slides to allow time for discussions. The DeSIRA-LIFT MEA services, what we're doing right now is we're mentoring clusters of projects in Asia. That's how we come to meet you, through the STREAM project in Mongolia. We're also supporting projects in Latin America, East and West Africa. We're helping them with theory of change and UFE. It's a typo there. We have also been offering MEL seminars and master classes. We've been providing desk help support, so helping projects as they have difficulties or barriers to address. And we're producing a bunch of how-to briefs, and the website link that's coming allows you all to be able to access that. And we're very interested right now in learning more about integrating MEL with multi-stakeholder platforms and introducing MEL into communication planning. And so this is an example of a how-to brief on UFE that you will find on our website, which is a sort of good summary of this presentation in 2 pages. And so what we've been doing with the projects is helping them produce, improve their theory of change, improve their evaluation strategies, and in many cases, allow them to develop an evaluation plan that is engages other stakeholders, which in the past would have been just done by the project core team. And finally, this will be part of the presentation. It includes a couple of video clips from partners who've been enjoying this, including one from Mongolia. And so this will be part of the presentation that we will share through the hosts. And this is the last slide. So we have a few minutes to entertain questions. Here are the 2 websites for DECI and the DeSIRA Community of Practice. So I don't know if you want me to stop sharing the screen so we can see each other.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Ricardo, Mr. Joaquin, and Dr. Sono. And I hope you all enjoyed for this amazing presentation. And so now we are starting for question and answer session. I saw Chimge, you raised hand. Please open your microphone.
Well, thanks very much for a very wonderful and innovative, informative learning session for us. I just realized, like we always use UF that we will use in utilization-focused evaluation in this evaluation. That's kind of, the word we always use in the evaluation, bidding and things, right? And then what we do is only, define these are the primary intended users, blah, blah. And we will use the mixed methods. We will inform the audience, but nothing very more than that. I would honestly admit that in most of our real world evaluation that we are doing. And then I was amazed of all these 11 steps up to meta evaluation. So we miss, at least I miss a lot of those steps, and really would like to learn more in depth, reviewing your presentation again and apply to my own experience at least. So very thank you for that. I have many questions, but the very top of my mind is, it seems like heaven for evaluators. Like if we really follow all the steps, really collaborating, ask with the client, the commissioner, asking really what they want to get out of this evaluation, etc. Right? But in real life, the time is very short from them, and like we have to rush to the inception report, right? So I was just wondering how, like from the commissioner side, do they realize that it would take this long time? It seems like about 60% of the whole evaluation is only for the 1 to 7 process, the first 7 process, like planning process, right? So realistically, how it really, how the commissioners feel about this, and then how long it takes for one evaluation to really go through these all steps, and especially as in Mongolia, if Sana was here, she could have answered. And then another question is on the META evaluation, the stage number 11, it says META evaluation, right? To my understanding, META evaluation is evaluation of many evaluation, but in this context, it seems like used differently, right? Assessing, going back to the commissioners or users of evaluation, asking how is it being used. So these are 2 burning questions, and if there another chance, I would ask. Thank you very much.
Let me try and answer the second question. Was this is heaven for evaluators? You're right, and it is very rare that we get a pure UFE. And so you're absolutely right. It's a very unusual and lucky situation. And we've been lucky with IDRC that they're a funder that embraces this approach. I think all of us from the DECI team who are on this call, Dal and Joaquin and Julius and I, every so often we have been able to do really good UFEs because, as you mentioned, from the beginning, the commissioner has bought into this approach. So the irony is that UFE started in the mid-80s, and as you say, people think they've adopted it, but commissioners have especially not. And so because they create readiness conditions that are not very good for this. And the last point, and then I'll invite my colleagues to help out with other answers, is the meta evaluation is a case study. And in the slide that Sonal showed, on the one side, there was the evaluation report produced by the project, and on the right side was the case study that Sonal wrote summarizing. So you're right, it's the meta evaluation is a case study, and our website has about 26 examples of them. So in our agreement, when we mentor a project, we say to them, we will produce a case study as the meta evaluation. Joaquin, did you want to compliment? I love this thing about heaven.
Yes, and I'm very sorry. I'm using someone else's name, but that's what happened when I rejoined the conversation. And yeah, I think it can be heaven or it can be hell if you don't have the right readiness conditions. So that's why we emphasize so much on readiness, because if you don't have the readiness conditions, it is very difficult to work with it. So just a caveat on that concept of heaven for evaluators. I think regarding your question of timing, I think it's a very important question because most people don't have the time to go through the whole process as ideally we should go through, but that's where as an evaluator, you have to be a bit creative and see how you can at least incorporate the main principles of the approach to make it work within fixed timelines. So in our experience, we have especially worked very hard at engaging the right primary evaluation users and negotiate with them and with the funder what we want to achieve, and find ways of making it work within very tight frameworks. So we've done UFE in 4 years in a particular project, but we've also done it in 3 months because of very limiting timelines.
Yeah, thank you. So
Julius, I think we should entertain other questions, but I'll invite also Dal and Julius to respond because they bring part of the DECI experience.
I had one thought, and one of the arguments that we've made during our experience over the years is that many of us have seen that during a year-long evaluation process, everybody has waited for the end of the process. And one of the advantages in the UFE process is that those changes can happen during the process. And so in making the argument to commissioners, we say, some of these things you find out during, and the people who are really interested in carrying out the project would like to make the change, and sometimes do make the change while the evaluation is going on. So you're saving money essentially because you're correcting your direction. Sometimes in small ways, but you're correcting your direction while you're doing it. You're not waiting for a year until the evaluation report is printed and handed around and hopefully read. Thanks.
yeah, thank you. And I left one question on the chat. And is the UFE costs higher than the traditional evaluation? Because it's requires more collaboration from the stakeholders and intended users. They're getting more time, yeah?
That's a very good question. I would say that it doesn't need to be, but it often is, because as you all know, collaboration and participation is time consuming. And I think we've had in some cases I think the trick we have found is in submitting a proposal using UFE, you emphasize how much time is going to be spent that is unusual in preparation. Sometimes we say about a third of the resources are spent in that whole orange part, the engagement and the going back and forth. And it also depends whether, in our case with the DECI project, we're mentoring others to learn UFE. But in our practice, as many of you, we have done evaluations using UFE. And so the trick is to state from the beginning, if there's no flexibility on the budget, is to say, we're going to spend extra time in the formulation part. But that's I think the only way to keep it within, so many of the contracts in evaluation have fixed budgets. So it's a matter of re-emphasizing more engagement at design, and more importantly, to allocate sometimes for facilitation of use, which is something that we often, as evaluation consultants in the past, did not even worry about. We produce a report and walk away. I don't know if that, Julius or Joaquin, you want to comment?
Well, maybe to add the idea of not just looking at cost, but also at return on investment, because that's something we don't usually do as evaluators, and maybe we should do it more often and make commissioners more aware of this. It's not about so much calculating how much you invest, but how much you get out of the evaluation. So I think the return on investment is much higher on UFE. But yeah, sometimes it's a tough sell, and that's part of the readiness assessment that you need to do. You have to see if they're really willing to invest the money and the time to do it.
Yes, I have two questions. One is on to follow up the previous question on meta-evaluation or the facilitation of users on the developmental evaluation. So usually, do you include in your methodological, when you prepare the technical, let's say, proposals, do you include that part in your technical area, or even after you get contracted, do you negotiate that with the commissioner? Because usually that's it seems like another big phase that after everything is done, you assess that part, right? So I was wondering how you deal with that inclusion or exclusion of that last phase in the whole evaluation. And the second question is, Joaquin, you showed the two columns. One is on UFE, difference between the conventional and then developmental evaluation. And in the development evaluation, you mentioned that it's more like evaluator acts like an integral part or internal team of the commissioner or client, right? Whereas the conventional, we always say, oh, we are external, so we are not biased or whatever. So that poses a question of the impartiality and not being biased or being independent. How do you reconcile that? Of course, we will still act very ethically during the developmental evaluation, but it just reads like there is some, question mark. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's an ongoing tension that we'll have to deal with. Just to clarify that as a developmental evaluator, you're not part of the commissioners, you're part of the implementers team, right? So you work with the team, but one of the aspects that is important is to understand the use, right? So use in developmental evaluation is not accountability. So it is about helping them develop a model or something new, right? So you provide ongoing feedback, and the emphasis is on learning. Some people might feel comfortable with that or not. Like sometimes it's threatening to have the evaluator working so close with the team. And so I think it's a matter of defining the roles in the early stages and defining the the mechanisms for providing that feedback, so that the evaluator does not become like a boss, right? So you provide the feedback, but it is up to the users to use the feedback or not. So I think agreeing on those mechanisms very early on is very important, and having clarity on the roles, right?
Mhm.
So I think in this particular approach, that neutrality is not that critical, because you're not trying to render judgment or to generate accountability. Just as an anecdote, I can tell you that I worked in a project where people were feeling so uncomfortable about it that they hired an external evaluator. But it was so complex that he couldn't actually get much data when he tried to do the data collection. And we, as the developmental evaluators, became his main source of evidence and of data. So that tells you something about it. Again, I think developmental evaluation is meant for very complex contexts, so it's not for everyday evaluation.
I'd like to complement that, Chingmi, because I think your first question is, where do you draw the line on facilitation of use and meta-evaluation? What we've often done is saying that facilitation of use is, we're allocating maybe a day or two. You may want to signal that it's going to be a workshop to review a draft report, which is not very unusual. It's quite common. Meta-evaluation is a luxury, so that's something that we can sometimes say, if there's additional resources, we'll write up a case study. So often that's lost, and I must say that when that's lost, there's learning that is lost, because that's a very useful reflection tool. I had an evaluation experience where the client, when we decided on facilitation of use, they asked me if it was okay if they wrote the recommendations and I reviewed them, and which is totally different. And so I became a bouncing board for their own evaluations. So there's options there. But the other question you had of objectivity is an important one. I think that in addition to what Joaquin said, the crux of the matter is the primary evaluation users who own the questions are very hungry for good evidence. That's where the rigor comes in. And so, one of the challenges we will have with commissioners is objectivity. And so when you have a chance to look at our little green booklet that's online, there's a chapter on page 81 written by IDRC, which is their confession of what it was like to be a commissioner of an evaluation that they could not control.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like a confession of pain, because it was the first time they gave up control, and then they witnessed how the evaluations were useful to the partners, and therefore they found them useful to themselves. So that's one of the challenges we've all had, Julius and Dal and Joaquin and I, is in trying to convince commissioners of this approach. So at least we have one precedent of a funder that's open to that. But Julius and I worked on a project in Kenya funded by a foundation, the MasterCard Foundation, and they too were open to this. So sometimes the foundations are more open to these methods.
Thank you.
Maybe I could add probably a point about what she asked about this meta evaluation, whether it is it can be included in a contract. That's step number 12. Even as the evaluator, it is something that we have an objective for. We really want to learn about the process. So as part of the whole process, we keep documenting or keep track of what happened, what has happened over time. And then we pile everything together. It's not exactly a one-off event. It's something that you keep conscious of how the whole event, the meetings, the discussions, the decisions make, the action points. And then you compile that as you compile the final report. And so sometimes it's just for internal use, the evaluator, the evaluation team, but you'll be surprised that the commissioners and the partners and the stakeholders, they are welcome to look at it. They're welcome to even edit it and learn from the whole process, because eventually they want to see if they want to do UFE on their own, how do they learn from this process? So the meta-evaluation reports becomes, first of all, primarily for the evaluator, but also available to the commissioner and the other stakeholders to use. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Nanda, you raised hand.
Yeah. So this is actually not really a question. It's just want to like and express how I'm thankful. Like, so one of presenter, I think this the lady, I forgot her name, like Narendra. Yeah, she mentioned like during her like in a speech and a presentation about like this how important they give some hints like during the data collection team. So I think this I'm really touched. She mentioned how it's important like in communication with our clients or like in primary users. So I think like I thought like so some of my previous experience like how it's important to communicate our clients or primary user regularly and efficiently during the evaluation process. So yeah, that's I think this is really reminded how it's important having this kind of communication with our clients. So because we are not actually evaluator, we are not actually not in enemy, you know, bringing in table shocking news and at the end of the evaluation, oh, this the findings or something. So instead of having this kind of the complex things, we have to we should be like in a very regular and you know just communication with our clients. You know, so what I do is like, for example, I to my from my previous experience, actually, I do like in a weekly, like in a the communication meeting with my clients when I'm doing this kind of evaluation exercise. Even it's not like an emerging things, I will just, oh, we are doing this and this now is we progress. We're doing this data collection or something, etc. So I think this is a really important, you know, exercise that you highlighted and mentioned it. Yeah. This actually just my personal thoughts. Yeah.
I like that
Ricardo,
it's emphasizing we're not the enemy is very good. Dal?
I think it was absolutely interesting, and you know, my feeling is that at the end of the process, actually there should be no surprises, because your communication that you were talking about is so ongoing. Then the recommendations don't surprise people, and instead of reacting negatively, everybody or many of them, most people understand what's happened and understand why they need to make the changes and the improvements. So you're absolutely, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. And one of the instruments we use to make that possible is we do use with the commissioners often, or with the projects, a memorandum of understanding, so that your role is, and we outline our role and their role, which shows both the distance and the closeness as well. And I think those two things again reinforce what you said about communications, ongoing communications, terribly important. And without that, there's lots of surprises.
Yeah. You know,
Yeah.
if you have a chance to see that the video that's linked to the presentation, our colleague in Mongolia, it's a very short video, but Batbold was his name, and he reported on how UFE allowed them to lose their fear of evaluation. So it's exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's very important, and also, you know, this giving like in weekly, like in the updates and then where we're now, and it's if there's some emerging issues, we will still have some time to validate, you know, this with the partners and with clients instead of, as mentioned earlier, like bringing this table like in a big elephant. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So I'm almost forget Chimge's one homework to get the screenshot from speakers and participants. But if you able to give a video, please give your video, and I need to take one screenshot. Bomten kom Shureshur. Could you please give the video? Okay. Okay. Okay, thank you again, Dr. Ricardo, Mr. Joaquin, and Dr. Sonal, and for participants, and Dr. Ricardo, Mr. Joaquin, and Dr. Sonal answering for those questions, and also for this great presentation. And it was a pleasure to have you with us. And so thank you all participants for attending and for us. I hope you have learned a lot and enjoyed this session. See you next session. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's our pleasure.
Thank you.
Very much.
Thank you
Bye,
so much.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.